In the shimmering heart of Zahram's palace, the billionaire sheikh Rashad al-Khoury sat behind a massive desk of polished ebony, his piercing gaze fixed on the gilded horizon beyond the arched windows. His reputation was feared and whispered across empires. No secretary had ever lasted more than a month by his side. Yet today, a new chapter was about to unfold, one that might shatter the cold fortress he had so meticulously built around his heart. The air was thick with the scent of frankincense and jasmine, curling from ornate brass burners scattered like jewels across the marble floors. Velvet drapes, heavy as secrets, framed the vastness of the desert stretching endlessly beyond the palace walls. The silence was broken only by the muffled steps echoing down the crystal corridor. A girl with eyes, like burning embers, stubborn as the desert wind itself. She entered with the confidence of one who refused to be intimidated. This was no ordinary secretary. Layla's sharp gaze met his without a flicker of fear. Her presence was a defiant spark amid the sprawling opulence, challenging the unyielding ice that encased the sheikh's heart. Rashad's lips curved into a brief sardonic smile. Another one, he mused internally, recalling the trail of fiery women who had tried and failed to tame him. But Layla was different. She did not wilt under his brooding command, nor did gold and silks beguile her. Instead, she offered quiet resistance that inflamed his curiosity and stirred a long-ignored warmth within. Their first exchange crackled with barely restrained power, a delicate dance of verbal sparring. She refused to bow. He refused to yield. When he tasked her with organizing the day's affairs, her response was a cool yet fierce, "I do not work for fear, Sheikh, only for respect." The sharpness in her tone pierced the usual veil of obedience, like a dagger. Rashad's heartbeat, usually steady as desert stone, quickened. This was a challenge unlike any before. Yet, beneath the daring front, shadows clung to Layla. Fragments of a secret whispered in the silence of the palace corridors. Unbeknownst to Rashad, her arrival was no coincidence. A folded letter slipped unnoticed into her satchel, hinted at a buried truth. A connection tangled deep in Rashad's own past, a thread that, if pulled, threatened to unravel everything he had built. His power, his solitude, and his carefully guarded pride. As dusk draped the palace in a velvety embrace, Rashad found himself restless, haunted not by the desert winds, but by the mystery of the girl who would not bow. The seeds of a storm had been sown. A reckoning cloaked in desire and defiance was dawning. Before the next secret of this vast emirate unfolds, make sure you're already part of our caravan of stories. Many destinies await their paths, and I don't want you to miss a single moment. Leave your like if the heart of this billionaire sheikh has already intrigued you. Tell me in the comments, from which city are you following this saga? And what twist do you think is coming next? Your passion for these dramas is what inspires us to continue. Thank you for being with us. The heavy doors of the grand hall creaked shut behind Layla as she stepped further into the depths of Zahram's palace. The scent of aged cedarwood mingled with the sweeter scents of sandalwood and rosewater, enveloping her in an intoxicating haze that could either soothe or suffocate. Yet nothing about this place made her falter, not the sprawling tapestries embroidered with stories of ancient glory, nor the marble floors that gleamed beneath her steady steps. Ahead, Sheikh Rashad al-Khoury remained seated behind his imposing ebony desk, the flicker of amber light casting shadows that danced with his stern silhouette. His eyes, as sharp and relentless as desert hawks, watched her approach with a mixture of challenge and curiosity. The usual cold detachment was softened by a simmering flame, a rare show of interest reserved for those who dared to face him without trembling. Layla's lips curved in the faintest smirk as she crossed the room. "You expect fear," she said softly, voice steady, yet threadbare with unspoken defiance. "But I came prepared with something far more dangerous." Rashad raised a brow, leaning back. "Respect," he said, repeating her words, tasting their weight. "A commodity far rarer than trust within these walls." Her gaze never wavered. "I shall earn it, not by bending, but by standing firm." The palace around them seemed to hold its breath. The murmurs of courtiers hidden behind gilded pillars, the rustle of silks trailing faintly down endless corridors. These whispers were the undercurrent of power, yet Layla felt distant from this labyrinth of royalty. She carried with her the pulse of a life lived in shadows, the unseen scars of choices made in desperation. As she settled into the ornate chair opposite Rashad, the smallest tremor passed unnoticed, a tightening at her throat, a sudden recall of the folded letter tucked deep in her satchel. It bore a seal, old as the desert itself, a signature entwined with a past neither she nor Rashad dared confront openly. Her fingers clenched briefly before she composed herself. "Your schedule," Rashad began, his voice cutting through the haze. "Will you manage it deftly? The council is restless, and the emirate expects nothing less than absolute precision." Layla nodded. "Order amidst chaos is the finest discipline, Sheikh. I am no stranger to storms." A faint click sounded as Rashad's fingers drummed the desk. "You intrigue me, Layla, not for your defiance alone, but because your calm hides depths few ever perceive." The confession, as silent as desert sands, struck unexpectedly. Outside the arched windows, the sun began its slow descent. Shadows stretched, lengthening across burnished gold and lapis lazuli, casting the palace into a twilight of promises and threats. Somewhere distant, the soft trickle of a fountain mingled with the first call to prayer, grounding the world's grandeur in humbling rituals. Layla's thoughts drifted for a fraction too long. Behind Rashad's measured exterior, a tempest brewed. His reputation as the Billionaire Sheikh was carved in stone, unyielding, ruthless, indomitable. Yet his eyes betrayed a man haunted by more than political intrigue or the endless demands of power. His solitude was not merely by choice. It was a fortress forged from betrayal, loss, and a secret. Ache that refused to heal. Their gazes locked. In that silent communion, years of loneliness and defiance converged. For the first time, Rashad saw not an obstacle or a flame to be extinguished, but a reflection of his own hidden fracture. And for all her guardedness, Layla recognized the flicker of vulnerability beneath the imposing facade. "The council meets at dawn," Rashad said quietly. "You will need allies. Trust is currency heavier than gold." She met his warning with steady resolve. "Then I shall deal in it wisely." The tension between them was electric, a charged current that neither wished to acknowledge, yet both felt in every measured breath. The palace doors whispered open, and a slender figure, draped in midnight silk, stepped inside. Her eyes gleamed with unyielding ambition, a cousin of Rashad's, adorned in jewels that caught the fading light like stars. She paused, intention sharp and cold. "Layla," the woman's voice was honey with venom. "Welcome to Zahram. I hope you prove a more delicate puzzle than the last." Rashad's face hardened for a fleeting moment before regaining the inscrutable mask. The woman's intrusion was calculated, a reminder that this palace was a web of shifting loyalties and hidden blades. Layla inclined her head subtly, sensing the unspoken threat. Delicate puzzles often conceal the sharpest truths. The cousin's eyes flickered. A grudging respect, or was it caution? Briefly softening her gaze before retreating behind a veil of smiles as she swept away. Rashad exhaled slowly, tension flowing from his shoulders in ripples. "You will find the emirate is as treacherous as the desert winds. Beware your footing." Layla's heart tightened, not from fear, but from the bitter truth of his words. She had come prepared for many battles, but none as perilous as the ones whispered in silken shadows and setting suns. Night wrapped the palace in velvety darkness, pierced only by the flicker of oil lamps and the gentle sway of curtains stirred by the nocturnal breeze. Alone in his chambers, Rashad walked toward an ancient cabinet carved with intricate patterns, retrieving a small ornate box. Inside lay a photo, faded and folded, a secret shard of his soul. His fingers traced the edges gently before his eyes narrowed. The mystery that Layla carried close was not just a threat. It was a key, one that could unravel the barren walls around his heart or tear apart the fragile peace he maintained with iron will. And somewhere beyond the marble and gold, in the cold desert night, a shadow moved with intent, an unseen enemy ready to strike, knowing that within Zahram's palace, a story of power, passion, and peril was only just beginning. Rashad's voice, barely a whisper, echoed through the stillness. "If you betray me, Layla, you will not only lose your place here, you will lose everything." But he did not yet know that the greatest danger was not betrayal from without, but the awakening of a force within, one that neither wealth nor power could suppress. As the first stars glittered defiantly against the ink-black sky, a whisper of old promises and darker secrets hung heavy in the air, a promise that the true battle for Zahram's soul was about to ignite. The first rays of dawn seeped through the intricate lattice of the palace windows, casting fragmented pools of light onto the cool marble floor. In this fragile illumination, Rashad al-Khoury's sharply cut silhouette stood motionless, a figure carved from shadows and power, yet beneath it, the unrest of a man teetering at the edge of his own fortress. Layla's footsteps had long faded into the distant corridors, but the echo of her defiance lingered, a whisper that unsettled the heavy silence of Zahram. Rashad's hands, usually warm from the desert sun's heat, now grew cold as he stared at the ornate box resting on his desk, the one that contained a relic from a past he had buried beneath layers of steel and pride. The sealed letter resting in Layla's satchel was not just parchment. It was a key, trembling with the weight of secrets that could crack the foundation of everything he had built. And though Rashad was accustomed to betrayal, this was a threat clawing at his heart, an unforeseen danger lurking beneath the surface of quiet rebellion. The walls of the grand hall reverberated with hushed voices as courtiers assembled for the dawn council. The opulence surrounding them was a gilded cage, gold-encrusted pillars, and sweeping tapestries that told tales of conquest and loss. Yet despite the palace's grandeur, the true battles were waged in whispered plots, and the sharp glances exchanged across banquet tables. Layla, seated with unwavering poise amid the sea of silken jewels, felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing upon her like the desert's unrelenting heat. Her fingers rested lightly on the polished wood of the council table, betraying none of the turbulence churning within, a storm concealed beneath calm resolve. Rashad entered with the measured grace of a man born to command, but tonight there was an unusual tension threading through his movements. His eyes, dark pools flickering with something unspoken, locked onto Layla with an intensity that made the court fall away. "You have survived your first night." His voice was low, edged with an uncharacteristic softness. Layla's lips pressed into a thin line before a quiet smile touched her face. "I intend to survive many nights, Sheikh," she replied, the words a steady flame against the encroaching shadows. A tense silence folded them together, the gulf between their worlds bridged momentarily by mutual acknowledgement. But beneath the surface, the gulf yawned wide, a chasm filled with suspicion, unspoken histories, and the ever-present danger of secrets explosive enough to destroy. The council's assembly began, voices rising in the calculated cadence of diplomacy. Rashad presided over the debate with a keen eye, catching every subtle shift in alliances, and the sharp edge of rivalry masked by polite smiles. Layla, though a newcomer, absorbed each moment with a scholar's precision, her mind weaving through the labyrinth of power. Between the formal speeches, the air thickened with the unspoken. Rashad's gaze found Layla's repeatedly, each meeting charged with a silent challenge. He wondered if she perceived it too, this fragile dance of authority and vulnerability. As the council's tensions mounted with news of border disputes and whispered betrayals, Rashad excused himself briefly, retreating to the quiet sanctuary of his chambers. The night outside had deepened, stars blazing cold fires over endless sands, mirroring the fire that now consumed him. Layla remained in the council hall, her heart pounding softly beneath the decorum. Her thoughts flickered to the letter, sealed with a sigil only a few dared to bear. A lineage, tied to the Emirate's founding, entwined with forbidden promises and ancient debts. Suddenly, a soft rustle from behind the curtain broke her concentration. A shadow stepped forward. Alia, Rashad's cousin, the silk-draped serpent of the palace. Her smile was a blade wrapped in velvet. "You tread dangerous waters, Layla," she murmured, voice smooth yet venom-laced. "The secrets you carry could drown even the strongest." Layla turned to face her, without hesitation. Better to drown than to live in the shallows of lies. Alia's eyes glimmered with reluctant admiration. "Careful, darling. The palace does not forgive those who swim against the tide." Behind their exchange, the faint clink of a bracelet echoed, the sound of caution draped in jewels. Alia's retreat was as deliberate as her approach, leaving Layla steeped in silence and suspicion. Back in his chambers, Rashad unlatched the ornate box once more. Inside lay the faded photograph, his wife's smile frozen in time, innocence stolen by the cruel hands of fate. A guilt that scorched his soul, chained him to a past he could never rewrite. The news of Layla's arrival had stirred something long dormant, a bitter hope tangled with fear. Could she be the redemption he never dared seek, or the reckoning that would consume him whole? A sudden knock fractured the stillness. Rashad's eyes flashed, alert. A servant stepped quietly, offering a folded parchment sealed with the royal emblem. The handwriting was unmistakable. With trembling fingers, Rashad broke the seal. The message was brief, yet its implications thundered through the chamber. "She uncovers truths meant to remain buried. Protect the emirate, or watch it burn." His jaw tightened. The balance was shattered. Layla, miles away in her chamber, sensed the shift even before the palace guards tightened their watch. The game had changed. No longer a mere secretary, she was a player on a deadly board. As night gave way to the cold blush of early morning, an unspoken question hung between Rashad and Layla. How much darkness could two fractured souls endure before the flames of their past consumed? All outside the palace, the desert wind whispered secrets of a gathering storm, one that would force promises into the light and shatter the fragile peace with a revelation that neither the billionaire Sheikh nor Layla could escape. The crimson light of dawn crept hesitantly through the carved latticework, painting the vast chamber in hues of fire and ash. Rashad al-Khoury stood motionless by the arched window, his silhouette a monument of sovereign command. Yet under the surface, a tide of unrest surged. The sealed letter, heavy with ancient sigils, slipped from the depths of his mind to the forefront of his thoughts. Its weight was more than parchment. It was a burden threatening to unravel years of unyielding will. In the council hall, murmurs of dissent tangled with the clinking of golden goblets as courtiers whispered behind silken fans. Layla sat poised, her presence a quiet storm amid the sea of perfumed nobles. Her gaze held steady, but inside, the letter in her satchel whispered a tumult she dared not betray. Rashad's footsteps echoed sharply as he entered. The room hushed in anticipation. His eyes were dark embers, hunting hers with a mix of suspicion and something dangerously close to respect. "You have weathered the night," he declared, voice a low thunder beneath the gilded ceilings. Layla inclined her head, a measured defiance sparking in her eyes. "Many more nights await, Sheikh, and I will stand through each." That fragile truce between them crackled like dry brush fire, the unspoken war of wills igniting beneath every measured word. The council erupted into debate, voices weaving. A tapestry of power, betrayal, and ambition. Rashad's gaze dissected every nuance, the shifting allegiances, the hidden daggers cloaked in smiles. But the real conflict simmered where eyes dared not linger, between the ruler and the woman who refused to kneel. Hours later, the chamber emptied save for whispers and shadows, electric charge of destiny pressing upon her. Suddenly, the soft creak of the doorway disrupted her solitude. Alia glided in, her midnight silk whispering against the marble. Her smile was the venomous gift of a serpent, beautiful, lethal. "You carry a heavy burden, Layla," she purred, "one that could sink even the mightiest of men." Layla's eyes narrowed, unwavering. Better to drown seeking truth than to suffocate in webs of deception. Alia laughed, a cold sound that echoed off the walls. "Words as sharp as yours could earn a throne or a dagger." With a deliberate bow, she vanished into the night, leaving behind a trace of jasmine and danger. Elsewhere, Rashad's sanctuary was shrouded in silence. He opened the ornate box, fingers caressing the faded photograph of a woman whose smile once lit. His world, the ghost of a past love stolen by betrayal and fire. His breath hitched as his mind grappled with the invocation of memories, the woman he lost and the trust shattered. Layla's arrival twisted the ache anew. Could she be his salvation, or the herald of his undoing? The palace door slid open quietly. A servant's voice broke the tension. "A message, Sheikh, from the royal envoy." Rashad took the scroll, breaking the wax seal with brutality. The words carved a new fracture in his resolve. "She moves with the shadows. Protect the emirate, or watch it burn." The weight of those letters pressed upon him like the desert noonday sun, relentless, inevitable. Back in her chamber, Layla sensed the tightening nets. Guards whispered behind thick doors. Eyes lingered longer than politeness allowed. The game had shifted. No longer just a secretary, she was a crucial piece in a deadly chessboard, drawn with blood and ambition. Night gave way to pre-dawn calm, but the palace trembled beneath the surface. Rashad and Layla, bound by secrets and silent storms, stood on the edge of a precipice neither dared cross, for now. And as the horizon blossomed with the first hesitant light, somewhere beyond the palace walls, a figure cloaked in sable watched from the dunes, eyes glinting with cruel intent. The final breath of night vanished with the whispered promise. The true reckoning for Zahram's soul was about to begin, and no one, least of all the billionaire sheikh or the woman who defied him, would escape unscathed. Dawn's fragile light barely traced the contours of Zahram's vast chamber when Rashad al-Khoury stood there, a colossus of solitude amid the creeping shadows. His fingers tightened around the faded photograph, its edges worn by years of desperate clutching. A woman's smile, forever frozen between hope and heartbreak. The pressing weight of the royal envoy's sealed message lay heavy on his desk, a silent storm threatening to drown the stoic fortress he so fiercely maintained. Outside the room, the palace stirred with hushed murmurs. The courtiers' whispers curling like smoke through gilded halls. The air was thick with the scent of rosewater and myrrh, but beneath the fragrant veil lurked an undercurrent, sharp as a dagger's edge. Every footstep, every flutter of silks, carried the restless anticipation of battles fought in shadow. Layla's chamber felt cold despite the desert sun's steady rise. She sat rigid, the ancient letter unfolded before her, like a map to a labyrinth she dared not navigate aloud. The cryptic script spoke of debts owed by blood, promises etched in silence, a legacy buried beneath Zahram's glittering facade. Her heart pounded with the fierce rhythm of a war drum, half fear, half fierce determination. Each word summoned the ghosts of past alliances and betrayals, binding her tighter to a destiny that no reprieve could soften. The velvet-rich silence shattered as the door eased open. Alia stepped inside, her presence as intoxicating as the perfumes she wore, sweet and poisonous. Her gaze, sharp as a scimitar's blade, locked on Layla with a wicked smile that promised both honey and venom. "You carry the weight of more than just secrets, Layla," Alia murmured. Her voice a silken threat. "This palace will not swallow you easily, nor excuse mistakes." Layla lifted her chin, steady as a desert spire. "I have endured harsher storms than whispers behind veils." Alia's eyes flickered with grudging respect before her smile curved into something darker. Brave words for someone dancing on the edge of a knife. Without another word, she spun away, the soft rustle of her gown the last echo of a warning. Alone, Layla allowed herself a moment to trace the jagged scar that ran deep beneath her calm, the scar no silk or gold could conceal. Her fingers brushed the seal once again, a reminder that her arrival here was no coincidence. The past was reaching out, pulling her irrevocably deeper into the web woven by power and betrayal. Far removed from these intimate dangers, Rashad paced his chambers like a caged lion. The photograph clasped momentarily against his chest, a cruel testament to love lost and trust betrayed. His dark eyes flickered with the fatigue of a man haunted by shadows only he could see. The sealed letter, now open, cast a long shadow. Its contents echoed a chilling truth. There were forces within Zahram, ready to ignite the flames of chaos should his vigilance falter. The whispered threat was clear. Remain protector of the Emirate's fragile peace, or watch it be consumed in fire. His thoughts fractured under the pressure, the lines between past and present blurring. Layla's sudden emergence in his life was no mere coincidence. It was a reckoning. Could she be the ally he desperately needed, or the saboteur who would shatter everything? His gaze hardened as a soft knock came at the door. A servant entered silently, bowing before placing a small, exquisitely carved box atop the desk. Rashad hesitated before lifting the lid. Inside rested a single ornate dagger, its hilt encrusted with jewels that caught the sunlight in a deadly shimmer. Attached was a note, its handwriting elegant, but icy with menace. "To the Billionaire Sheikh, your enemies move closer. Trust is scarce." Choose your allies wisely. The weight of the blade in his hand was a stark reminder. Everything in Zahram was a game of power, where one wrong move could mean death. Meanwhile, Layla stood at her window, the endless desert painted in hues of amber and gold by the rising sun. Her reflection merged with the panoramic vista, a woman torn between duty and desire, between secret lineage and the man whose fortress of pride she threatened to breach. Her voice was barely a whisper as she spoke to the silent sands. I have much to lose, and even more to gain. Suddenly, the faint sound of hurried footsteps echoed along the hallway. Rashad's cousin Alia reappeared, her expression unreadable beneath the mask of regal composure. Sheikh Rashad awaits, she intoned, her voice both an invitation and a warning. The palace grows restless. Shadows lengthen with every secret unveiled. Layla nodded, bracing herself against the wave of unease that always rose when palace intrigues swirled like desert storms. With steely resolve, she stepped from her chamber, each footfall echoing a promise. She would not merely survive this place. She would master it. In the grand hall, Rashad's eyes met hers once more. The silence between them was thick, charged with a tempest neither dared voice. You walk a perilous path, he said quietly, the flicker of vulnerability betraying his iron facade. One where trust is a blade and loyalty a mirage. Layla's gaze did not falter. Then I will be both shield and sword. Before he could respond, a sudden commotion erupted near the entrance. A courier stumbled in, breathless. A sealed envelope crushed in his hand. Rashad's pulse quickened as he took the message, breaking the seal with fingers trembling on the edge of control. The words inside were devastatingly clear. A betrayal from within. The enemy wears a familiar face. The room seemed to freeze, time hanging on a knife's edge. Layla's heart lurched, her eyes locked on Rashad's, fierce and unguarded. In that charged instant, the unspoken truth pulsed between them. Secrets were no longer shadows. They were flames threatening to burn Zahram to ashes. And in the seething silence, Rashad finally admitted the fear that no throne or treasure could dispel. The greatest battle for his soul had only just begun. The flicker of the oil lamp cast long shadows across Rashad's chambers, the gilded walls seeming to constrict around him like the weight of the secrets they held. His hands trembled slightly as he folded away the damning parchment, the warning from the royal envoy reverberating in his mind like thunder. Betrayal from within, the enemy wearing a familiar face. The palace, a kingdom of light and illusion, now felt more like a prison where every whispered word could mean death. He paced, each step a sharp echo on the marble floor. The ornate dagger lay heavy in his palm, the jagged edge reflecting the flicker of candlelight and the fracture deep in his soul. This was no longer a game of politics. It was a war waged in shadows, in the silken corridors where trust was a currency more volatile than gold. Layla's words from earlier lingered, stubborn and fierce. Then I will be both shield and sword. Did she truly understand what that meant within these walls? Or was she blinded by youthful courage that would soon be tested by fire? Outside his chamber, the palace hummed with an eerie quiet, the usual bustle of courtiers replaced by a taut tension. that crackled beneath every polished surface. Somewhere, distant laughter rippled through the halls, a brittle reminder that appearances, no matter how radiant, often masked the darkest deceptions. Rashad's gaze hardened as he thought of Aliyah, his cousin, the wolf cloaked in silk who prowled Zahram's halls with venom disguised as grace. Her parting words to Layla still echoed in his ears. Choose your allies wisely. A subtle poison that could unravel the strongest bonds. Layla, meanwhile, sat alone in the quiet sanctuary of her chamber. The heavy drapes muffled the muted sound of the desert night, a stark contrast to the storm raging within her. Her fingers traced the ancient sigil on the letter once more before folding it with meticulous care. The truth woven into those cryptic words struck at the core of her identity, binding her fate ever tighter to the enigmatic Billionaire Sheikh. She remembered Rashad's gaze, sharp as the desert hawk, layered with something close to respect, yet shadowed by wariness. Behind his formidable facade was a man burdened by ghosts, haunted by losses no wealth could erase. A sudden rap at her door startled her. The familiar silhouette of Aliyah slipped inside, her presence dripping with calculated ease. "You dance on a blade's edge, Layla," Aliyah whispered, voice as soft as a silk thread, but sharp enough to slice. "This palace devours those who stray from the path. Be certain your steps will not falter." Layla met her gaze unflinchingly. "I am no stranger to storms. Zahram's winds may howl, but I will stand firm." Aliyah smiled, a cold, enigmatic curve, and retreated into the shadows, leaving behind a faint trace of jasmine and threat. The tension outside seeped inward. The game was changing, the players shifting. Layla's secret, the legacy buried in that letter, was a spark amid dry tinder. Rashad's fortress of solitude was beginning to crack. Later that evening, Rashad found himself wandering through the vast palace gardens, an oasis of moonlit palms and fountains murmuring secrets in the language of water. The air was heavy with the scent of roses and spice, but beneath it all was the undercurrent of unrest. He paused beside a carved marble bench, his thoughts drifting to the photograph hidden deep in his chambers. The woman whose smile had once illuminated his world and now only haunted his nights. That memory was a blade lodged deep in his heart. The alliance forming between them was unlikely, fragile. Yet something about Layla stirred the embers of a hope he had long buried beneath decades of betrayal and iron will. His fingers clenched, nails digging into the stone. Could he trust her? Could he allow this woman, carrying her own shadows, to pierce the walls he so fiercely guarded? As if summoned by the tension, soft footsteps approached. Layla emerged from the shadows, her silhouette framed by the moonlight. Strong, yet vulnerable. "You should not be here." Rashad's voice was low, charged with warning and concern. Layla's eyes glimmered with unspoken defiance. "Neither should you be alone in your doubts, Sheikh." A fragile silence stretched between them, heavy with words unsaid. The desert night wrapped around the palace like a silken shroud, concealing the fragile trust budding between two fractured souls. Suddenly, A distant cry shattered the stillness. Urgent, desperate. They exchanged a glance charged with unspoken fear before hurrying toward the source. The grand hall was alive with chaos. Servants whispered frantic warnings. Courtiers shuffled nervously, and at the center stood a breathless messenger, clutching another sealed envelope. Rashad took it sharply, breaking the wax with a hand steady despite the storm raging inside. His eyes widened as he read. The words were fewer, but each syllable struck like a scimitar to the heart. The traitor is closer than you imagine. Blood will stain these halls before the dawn. Rashad's jaw clenched. His gaze locked with Layla's, the weight of impending betrayal crushing down on them both. For a moment, the palace held its breath. The opulence, the power, the desert's eternal watch, everything silhouetted against the growing storm. In that charged silence, Rashad whispered, "Trust must become a blade, sharp enough to strike before it cuts us." Layla's reply was a fierce nod, her voice barely a whisper, but resolute as the desert sun. "Then let us be the ones to draw it first." Outside, beyond the palace walls, the desert wind howled, carrying with it the scent of betrayal, the promise of fire, and a reckoning that neither Sheikh Rashad nor Layla could escape. And as the first light of dawn bled across the horizon, a shadow detached itself from the dunes, a figure, watching, waiting to ignite the war, hidden within Zahram's most sacred halls. The palace was swallowed by a hollow quiet, broken only by the distant murmur of restless courtiers, seeking whispers in gilded corners. Rashad al-Khoury stood rigid beneath the towering arches of his private study, the ornate dagger, a cold weight of authority and menace, resting heavily in his palm. The message from the royal envoy clung to his thoughts like a desert storm's forewarning. Betrayal was no longer a distant rumor. It had crept within these walls, wearing a mask so familiar it chilled him to the bone. His gaze fell to the photograph again, the faded smile of a woman who had once been everything he treasured. The pain behind his eyes was a secret known only to the shadows that stretched across the marble floor. That memory was a wound, raw and relentless, gnawing away any remnants of vulnerability he dared hide. A slow breath escaped him, steadying the tempest roiling inside. Outside his chamber, footsteps softened against the richly woven carpet, the delicate yet sure approach of Layla. She appeared at the threshold, framed by the dim light of the corridor, her dark eyes reflecting a tempest not unlike his own. "You carry the weight of a palace at war," she said quietly, her voice a blend of defiance and understanding. "And yet here you stand, alone." Rashad's expression softened for a heartbeat, the iron mask slipping to reveal a flicker of the man beneath the Sheikh's mantle. "Loneliness is the companion of power, Layla," he admitted, voice low and rough. "But now, the stakes have shifted. The enemy is closer than ever." She stepped inside, the scent of frankincense mingling with the warmth of her presence. "Then we must choose our steps with greater care. Trust is no longer a choice, it is a weapon." His eyes narrowed thoughtfully, "and a liability." Their silent moment was shattered by a sudden clatter. a servant hastily entering with a sealed envelope, trembling under the weight of urgency. Rashad's fingers opened the wax with the precision of a king, accustomed to command, revealing a brief but devastating message. The traitor's shadow falls where the heart least expects. The room seemed to chill, despite the desert heat pressing against the palace walls. Layla's stare met his, fierce and unwavering, yet threaded with the fragile question of hope. "We are bound by secrets old as Zahram itself," she whispered. "But I will not let those shadows claim us." Rashad's jaw clenched. The palace breathes 1,000 lies, and every smile hides a dagger. To survive, we must become the storm, not the stone. Outside, the call to prayer floated softly, a haunting melody that wove through the vast halls. The sun dipped lower, casting labyrinthine patterns of light and shadow, a reflection of the tangled webs inside. Layla moved closer, her hand barely brushing the edge of his cloak, a spark igniting in the stillness. "I came here not to be your shield or your sword, Sheikh, but your equal. To break the chains this place has forged around us both." The flicker in Rashad's eyes deepened, a silent acknowledgement of a bond forged in fire and secrecy. Yet beneath the growing connection, a tempest churned, new threats lurking beyond the edge of their fragile alliance. "Tell me," he murmured, voice roughened by unspoken fears, "what hidden truths do you carry in your satchel? What price will you pay to see Zahram's soul preserved?" Layla's fingers clenched at her side, the folded letter burning with unsaid truths. "I walk a path paved with ghosts. Some I must face before I can claim the dawn." From the shadows beyond, a subtle sound echoed, a click of heels against marble. The faint rustle of silk preceded Alia's entrance, her eyes sharp, lips curving in a smile laced with poison. Such stirring declarations. Alia's voice was honeyed venom. "But beware, Layla. The deeper you delve, the darker the palace's heart reveals itself." Layla's gaze cut through the gilded menace. "I am no stranger to the dark, cousin. The desert's night has taught me to see in shadows." Rashad stepped between them, the air crackling with tension. "Enough." His voice was final, made of thunder and command. "This palace can devour those who stand divided. If we falter now, Zahram's flame will die, not with a blaze, but a slow, suffocating ash." Alia's eyes glittered, a storm brewing beneath her polished exterior. "The flame is fragile, Rashad, and some embers burn unwatched until they set the night ablaze." Her departure was a silent echo, a reminder of the war being waged in whispered halls and hidden glances. Alone once more, Rashad and Layla faced the silent weight of the moment, the inevitability of the battles ahead. The palace no longer bore only the stain of power, but the shadow of betrayal creeping closer with every pulse. As they stood, side by side, a distant horn shattered the heavy air, a summons from beyond the palace walls. Rashad's eyes darkened, resolve hardening like desert stone. "The hour comes swiftly. Prepare yourself, Layla. The game changes with every breath we take." Her reply was steady, fierce. "Then let us be the masters of its next move." Outside, beneath the vast canopy of stars, a figure cloaked in midnight watched, with eyes burning cold. The final pieces were in motion, and the true reckoning for Zahram's soul was no longer a whisper on the wind, but a storm on the horizon, one that would test love, loyalty, and the fragile line between power and destruction. The night had deepened into a velvet blackness, yet Zahram's palace throbbed with a tension that no darkness could veil. In the quiet sanctuary of his chambers, Rashad al-Khoury held the jeweled dagger loosely in his hand, its cold weight grounding him amid the storm of whispered threats and unseen enemies. The message, the traitor close, blood poised to stain these sacred halls, echoed relentlessly in his mind. He clenched his jaw, the sharp edge of pain cutting beneath his iron mask. Trust, once a currency he spent freely, was now a weapon made brittle by betrayal. A soft knock broke the suffocating silence. Layla entered, her silhouette framed by the dim light filtering through latticed windows. Her eyes burned with the fierce calm that had unsettled Rashad from the moment she crossed the palace threshold. She carried none of the trepidation that had felled every other woman before her. Instead, a quiet defiance, the kind that challenged empires. "You came," Rashad whispered, voice roughened by a mixture of relief and suspicion. She stepped closer, the scent of frankincense blending subtly with the hint of jasmine, trailing behind her like a secret. "I will not abandon a fortress crumbling from within," she replied, her tone steady but laden with the weight of unspoken fears. Their gazes locked, the space between them charged with silent admissions. The palace around them, a labyrinth of gold, silk, and concealed daggers, was no longer just a backdrop, but an active participant in their fragile alliance. Rashad studied her face, searching for cracks beneath her fierce exterior. For a woman newly thrown into the heart of Zahram's deadly game, her composure was both a challenge and a balm. "Layla," he murmured, voice nearly lost in the breathless moment. "The traitor walks these halls wearing the mask of loyalty. How deeply does your secret cut? How much are you willing to lose to protect this emirate?" Her throat tightened, but she stood unmoved. "The letter I carry binds me by blood and honor. My truth may ignite fires, but it will not burn without purpose." Outside, the distant call to prayer wove through the corridors, a haunting melody, underscoring the fragility of their world. Each word seemed to wrap the palace in uncertainty, a reminder that even tradition could not anchor them against the rising tide. Suddenly, footsteps echoed sharply in the entryway. Alia appeared like a shadow cast from venomous silk, her eyes gleaming with an unreadable blend of curiosity and menace. "Still clinging to hope, Rashad?" she purred, glancing at Layla with a predatory smile. "Be wary. Sometimes the scorpion bites the hand that feeds it." Rashad's stare hardened, stepping protectively toward Layla. "This palace demands unity, cousin. Division will be its ruin." Alia laughed softly, a sound that echoed like distant thunder. "Unity built on secrets is illusion. Shadows gather, and soon the truth will surface, no matter how deep it's buried." Without another word, she slipped away, leaving behind a palpable silence that pressed down on them like the desert's relentless heat. Layla exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of enemies both seen and unseen pressing inward. Rashad's presence was a pillar amid chaos, yet even pillars can crumble when betrayal cuts from within. "I am not here as a shield," her voice low, a promise threaded with steel. "But as your equal, we will unmask the traitor before Zahram bleeds." His eyes softened ever so slightly, revealing the traces of a man desperate to trust, yet haunted by every fracture betrayal had carved into his soul. The flicker of the oil lamp painted shifting shadows on the walls, ghosts of past betrayals, whispered vows, and uncertain futures. Suddenly, a low rumble vibrated through the palace grounds, muffled at first, then growing stronger, an ominous thunder rolling across the desert beyond the walls. Rashad's gaze flew to the window, where the endless dunes seemed to shiver beneath an unseen storm. Layla's fingers brushed the folded letter in her satchel, the symbol of an ancient dynasty burning hotter than the desert sun. "The sand shifts," she murmured, voice barely above a whisper, "and with it the fate of Zahram." A sharp rap on the door shattered the fragile calm. A guarded servant appeared, breathless, bearing another sealed envelope. Without hesitation, Rashad broke the resin seal, eyes scanning the words that unraveled a new nightmare. The betrayer's hand reaches into the closest circle. Darkness will eclipse the dawn. His jaw clenched so tightly, his knuckles whitened. He met Layla's fierce stare, the shared burden settling like a stone between them. "We are running out of time," he said, voice low but resolute. "The palace is no longer a fortress, but a cage we must escape, together." Layla nodded, the fire in her chest igniting into a raging blaze. "Then let us be the storm Zahram never saw coming." The tension in the room thickened as distant footsteps approached. A reminder that the game was far from over. And as the flickering candlelight cast elongated shadows on the marble floor, a silent truth settled between them. The battle for Zahram's soul had begun in earnest, and the greatest betrayal was yet to reveal itself. The first light of dawn stretched gently across Zahram's horizon, spilling a warm glow over the endless desert and into the heart of the palace. Within the grand chamber, Sheikh Rashad al-Khoury stood tall, his figure bathed in the serene gold of morning, yet his eyes held the weight of relentless battles fought in shadows. The once impenetrable fortress around his heart now softened, fragile threads woven by unexpected trust and opening hope. Layla entered quietly, the cool silk of her robe whispering against the marble floor. Her gaze met his, steady and unwavering, carrying the fierce calm that had both unnerved and captivated him since her arrival. No longer was she the defiant outsider, but a partner forged in the crucible of trials and secrets. They shared a breathless moment, the silence between them heavier than any words could be. The palace, once a cage of whispered betrayals, now felt like a promise of renewal in the light of a new day. Rashad's voice broke the stillness, softer than ever before. "The traitor revealed themselves in our midst, but their shadows no longer threaten Zahram." Layla nodded, the memory of latest revelations vivid in her mind. The trusted faces unmasked, the venomous plots exposed. The palace had trembled, but it had not fallen. Together, they had unraveled the webs spun. By deceit, Alia's manipulations thwarted through cunning and courage. The cousins' retreat was definitive, the silk serpent's venom drained by the strength of unity between Sheikh and secretary. Now co-guardians of the Emirate's fragile peace. "We stood on the edge of ruin," Layla murmured, stepping closer, the fire of resilience glowing in her eyes. But by choosing to face the storm together, we became more than survivors. We became protectors of our home and of each other. Rashad's hand found hers, roughened from years of command, yet tender in touch. The gesture held a language unspoken, a vow sealed beyond politics and power. Outside, the golden desert wind stirred the blossoming jasmine in the palace gardens, a fragrant anthem to rebirth. Palm fronds danced softly in the breeze, carrying with them the promise of peace rooted in the trials survived. In the council hall, once thick with suspicion and cold alliances, laughter now rang true. Noble faces relaxed, and cautious smiles bloomed where doubt had once reigned. The Emirate was healing, its people united by the courage of two who dared to rewrite its fate. Layla's secret lineage, once a source of fear and suspicion, had become a beacon of strength. The ancient debts written in that folded letter were repaid, not with blood, but with honor and renewal. Her presence no longer a threat, but a bridge between Zahram's fractured past and its hopeful future. Rashad lifted her hand to his lips, a silent acknowledgement of the woman who had wrought his transformation. "You have become the dawn in this desert night," he whispered, eyes brimming, with something rare, gratitude and love entwined. Her smile was soft, genuine, a woman no longer guarded by shadows, but illuminated by belonging. "And you, the fortress I will stand beside, not behind." The palace doors opened to the warming sun, as courtiers gathered to witness a new beginning. The grand hall, adorned with tapestries and jewels, bore witness not only to wealth, but to the triumph of trust and redemption. Whispers of scandal gave way to songs of hope. Old wounds began to mend beneath the steady light of unity. The Emirate, once poised on the brink of ruin, now pulsed with life renewed. Rashad and Layla stood before the assembly, their hands tightly clasped, eyes shining with the certainty of a future forged, not by solitude, but by shared strength. The Sheikh's voice carried clear and resolute. "Zahram's soul has been tested by fire and shadow. Today, we step forward together, stronger, wiser, united. This is not the end, but the beginning of our legacy." Applause rippled through the hall as faces brightened with hope. In that resonant moment, the palace breathed again, its heart beating in time with the courage of two souls who dared to love beyond their fears. Later, beneath the vast desert sky, dusted with early stars, Rashad and Layla walked side by side through the blooming gardens. The fragrance of jasmine wrapped around them, a tender reminder of battles fought and won. Layla's hand rested lightly on Rashad's arm, the weight of secrets now lifted, replaced by trust unbreakable. The desert is wide, she said quietly, but with you, I need. Fear no horizon. Rashad's smile was slow, warm, the fortress finally fallen. And I, no longer lost in shadows, only found. Together, they watched as the first bird took flight, carrying their hope across the endless sands. The future stretched before them, uncertain yet radiant, with love as their guide and the promise of peace, their eternal companion. In Zahram's palace, the gilded walls no longer whispered of betrayal, but sang of redemption. The billionaire sheikh and the woman who dared to challenge fate had sealed their story. A tale of power softened by humanity, of solitude transformed into belonging. As the desert wind carried their laughter into the rising sun, one truth stood clear. Even in a world built on gold and ambition, it was love, unyielding and true, that forged the strongest empire of all.